Russian paratroopers flee on a 2 km front line in the city of Bakhmut. The Ukrainian army won a great victory. During a press conference at the Kyiv Press Center on Wednesday morning, May 10, Colonel Serhiy Cherevadyi, spokesman for the Eastern Military Command of Ukraine, said that in the past few days Russian troops have been aggressively attacking to seize control of Ukraine. For the city of Bakhmut before the May 9 deadline set by Putin. However, on what Russia calls Victory Day, the Russian paratroopers and Wagner troops were defeated. The Russian airborne brigades assigned to flank Wagner's troops fled from the fierce Ukrainian attack on a 2 km long front line. The Ukrainian defenders repelled the Russian army by half a kilometer. In just one day, the Ukrainian army recaptured the territory that the Russian army took at least 4 months to capture. Due to the sudden escape of the Russian paratroopers, Wagner's army struggled awkwardly against the Ukrainian forces, before deciding to withdraw, leaving hundreds of dead comrades behind. Colonel Serhiy Cherevadyi said, "Victory today, not whether the Wagner army withdraws or not, is the turning point in the battle for Bakhmut." President Zelensky was informed of this important victory. During a joint press conference with European President Ursula von der Leyen, he told Leyen that Russia has failed in the city of Bakhmut. Former Russian military commander Igor Girkin commented that the battle in Bakhmut was an affront to the Russian army because the city was so small that Wagner and Russian regular troops took 9 months to capture. The entire area of Bakhmut city and its suburbs is 41.6 square kilometers. For you and your brothers and sisters to easily understand, we would like to detail this. The area of Thursday Duk is 48 square kilometers. Thus, Bakhmut city is not equal to Thursday Duk. According to Major General John Kirby, communications coordinator for the U.S. National Security Council, from December to the end of April alone, the Russian side suffered 100,000 casualties, mainly in the city of Bakhmut, of which more than half are Wagner troops. On May 7, Colonel Serhiy Cherevadyi said, "In the past 9 months, at least 100,000 Russian soldiers have died in and around Bakhmut. But these are preliminary calculations. I'm sure further verification will only show this number going up. This is natural because the enemy uses so-called human sea attacks as the main method of waging war." 2. Zelensky of Ukraine says Russia has failed to capture Bakhmut. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia had failed to capture the eastern city of Bakhmut before the deadline of May 9, the day Russia marked the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. They could not take Bakhmut. This is the last major military operation that they want to complete by May 9, Zelensky said at a joint press conference with European President Ursula von der Leyen. Unfortunately, the city no longer exists. Everything was completely destroyed, he added. Zelensky called for more ammunition. The Ukrainian president also said that ammunition that the European Union pledged to supply Ukraine was needed on the battlefield, and called for faster delivery. Ukraine daily proves the effectiveness of our defense against Russian aggression. Every missile of terrorists intercepted, every success of our fighters in defeating Russian attacks, these are proof that we see that it is possible to defeat the invaders. This strategy, said Mr. Zelensky. The main thing is the proportion of our abilities with the capabilities of the aggressor. And in this context, I thanked Ursula for the readiness of the European Union to supply Ukraine with this much-needed ammunition, 1 billion shells, and we also discussed the key issues, the speed at which these ammunitions are procured and transported, because they are needed on the battlefield right now. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin marked May 9 with the annual Victory Day parade and launched another scathing attack on the West, accusing the West of holding Ukraine hostage for its allies. Anti-Russian plan. He also claimed that real war had broken out against Russia. He said that the West took Ukraine hostage to prolong the war against Russia, despite the fact that if he ceased firing and withdrew his troops, the war would end today. 3. Leader Wagner Prigozhin criticized the Russian military, claiming that the Russian army had blatantly lied and failed to hold the line near the city of Bakhmut. In a new development, Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin criticized the Russian military leadership for their lack of support for his fighters and for failing to hold the line near Bakhmut, in a lengthy video clip posted on his social media account. Today, Tuesday, one of the units of the Ministry of Defense fled from one of our flanks, abandoning their position. All fled and left a front nearly 2 kilometers wide and 500 meters deep. The good thing is that we blocked it somehow, Prigozhin said. Prigozhin went on to say that his warriors would be able to take the city if provided with enough ammunition, but Moscow went against its initial promises. We were promised on May 7 that we would be provided with ammunition, he explained. On the morning of May 8, Prigozhin said that Moscow had ordered to give Wagner everything it wanted. However, after that they were only offered 10% of what was asked. We were simply blatantly deceived, said Prigozhin. Founder Wagner went on to say that the chief of the Russian General Staff Valery Gerasimov was responsible for this decision. This morning, Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov personally corrected all the figures and reduced them by 10 times, he claimed without providing evidence. It is so awful. If we continue like this, we won't be able to fight. If you carry out all the missions to fool the Supreme Commander-in-Chief Vladimir Putin, then either the Supreme Commander will tear you apart or the Russian people, who will be very upset if this war fails, added Prigozhin. Founder Wagner added that his warriors will not leave Bakhmut and that Wagner troops will hold out for a few more days. Our opponent today is not the armed forces of Ukraine, but Russian officials. Especially the almost warlike attitude towards us, he said. The shells are in the warehouse, they are resting there. Industry is producing these stocks, and instead of supplying the military, they are kept in warehouses. No one knows what to do. Instead of spending a bullet to kill the enemy, they killed our soldiers. This complaint is just the latest development in an ongoing controversy between Prigozhin's private group of mercenaries and Moscow's military leadership. Last week, Prigozhin launched a furious attack against the Russian Defense Ministry, accusing them of sitting like fat pigs in offices when his men died in Bakhmut. He threatened to completely withdraw troops from the besieged Ukrainian city, which Russia had been unable to capture for months. However, Prigozhin appeared to have changed his mind on Sunday, after receiving concessions from the government. He announced his forces would stay in Bakhmut as Moscow promised to provide us with ammunition and weapons, as much as possible so that we can continue our next actions. But this latest spat shows that the dispute between Prigozhin and Moscow is far from resolved. 4. French President mourns journalist killed in Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron mourned the death of Armin Soldin, an AFP cameraman killed in Ukraine. We share the pain of his family and all of his colleagues, Macron said on Tuesday. Soldin was killed on Tuesday by a rocket hit on the outskirts of the town of Chasiv Yar, near Bakhmut, according to colleagues who witnessed the incident. Sergei Kislitsia, Ukraine's permanent representative to the United Nations, also tweeted in French about Soldin's death, that the journalist paid with his life for his bravery and offered his condolences. Soldin's loved ones. We are saddened to learn of the death of video journalist Armin Soldin in eastern Ukraine today. All our thoughts go out to his family and loved ones. Soldin, a French citizen of Bosnian origin, was killed by a rocket on the outskirts of the town of Chasiv Yar, near Bakhmut, AFP quoted colleagues who witnessed the incident. He was standing with 4 colleagues at the time of the attack, but the other journalists were not injured, the news agency said. Soldin is among a number of prominent journalists killed since the start of the all-out invasion of Russia, including Fox News photojournalist Pierre Zakshevsky and consultant Alexandra Sasha Kovshinova, journalist and reporter documentary Brent Renault and photojournalist Max Levin. 5. Ukraine says civilians in the Zaporizhia region are being evacuated deeper into Russian-held territory. During a press conference at the Kyiv Press Center on the morning of Wednesday, May 10, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk said that the so-called civil-military government has been set up by Russia in the invaded city of Kamyanka-Dniprovska. Ukraine in the southern region of Zaporizhia is evacuating families and public sector officials to Russian-controlled territory. On May 8, Russian invaders began to evacuate preschool and school-age children with their parents, as well as teachers and other public sector employees from the city of Kamyanka-Dniprovska in Zaporizhia province. Not many people are willing to participate. Late on Thursday, Yevgeny Belitsky, the acting governor of the invaded areas of the Zaporizhia region, who has the backing of Russian President Vladimir Putin, announced his administration would evacuate people from places near the southern front lines. South of the war. Yesterday, Yuri Malashko, governor of Zaporizhia of Ukraine, said in a television interview that he understood that some Moscow-backed officials were leaving the invaded towns and suggested the evacuation of those who Russian passport holders, ahead of the expected Ukrainian counterattack. We also heard that they first brought civilians, including children, to Berdyansk. Then they will go to Crimea or to the invaded Donetsk region, Malashko said. Ivan Fedorov, the Ukraine-elected mayor of Melitopol, a city in Zaporizhia, told Ukrainian TV channel that it was not a mass evacuation, but hundreds of people being evacuated to show off. He announced that Russia was sending more forces to the southern front line and that in Melitopol the army had begun to mine administrative buildings, kindergartens, and schools. Fedorov advised people in invaded areas to prepare for a counterattack by seeking shelter, charging spare batteries, and stocking up on food and water. 6. The Pentagon officially announced that Ukraine shot down a Russian missile with a Patriot missile system. On Tuesday, Pentagon spokesman Brigadier General Pat Ryder told reporters, "I can confirm that the Ukrainians shot down a Russian missile using the Patriot missile defense system," Ryder said. "As you know, that system is part of a broader range of air defense capabilities that the United States and the international community have provided to Ukraine." Ryder added that the United States and its partners will continue to strengthen their ground and munitions air defense capabilities to help Ukraine control sovereign skies and help Ukraine defend its citizens from Russian attacks. 7. The French National Assembly passed a petition asking France and the European Union to list the Wagner Group as a terrorist organization. Lawmakers in the French National Assembly on Tuesday approved a motion calling on the French government and the European Union to list Russia's private military group Wagner as a terrorist organization. The vote was passed with an absolute majority. All 331 representatives present voted in favor. The petition, seen as a symbolic move from members of the Council, also calls on the French government to push for the United Nations to list Wagner as a terrorist organization. The Wagner Group is currently on the sanctions list of the United States, the United Kingdom and the European Union. 8. Ukraine has what it takes to successfully retake territory, says U.S. Secretary of State. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says he thinks Ukraine has the resources it needs to recapture the territory in an anticipated counteroffensive. They already have what they need to continue to be successful in recapturing territory that has been taken by force by Russia over the past 14 months, Blinken said at a joint news conference with British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly. "It's not just weapons, but there's also training," Blinken added. "That ensures that the Ukrainians can maintain the systems that we provide them, and it is important, of course, that they have the right plan, again, to be successful." Blinken's comments came on the same day the U.S. announced an additional $1.2 billion in aid to Ukraine to bolster its air defenses and maintain ammunition supplies. 9. UK Foreign Secretary says Ukraine's planned counterattack will not be a decisive breakthrough. Ukraine has shown tremendous courage and resistance since the Russian invasion began, but one shouldn't expect a movie-like counterattack from Kyiv, the UK's top diplomat said during a visit to the United States on Tuesday. "The real world doesn't work that way," British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly said. His remarks came amid rumors of a Ukrainian counterattack against Russia. "I hope and expect them to do very, very well, because whenever I see Ukrainians, they do better than expected," he said, adding that people have to be realistic. "This is the real world. This is not a Hollywood movie," Cleverly said. He also expressed London's goodwill for China to play a more constructive role in ending the war. "We know that Xi Jinping has a significant degree of influence over Vladimir Putin," Cleverly said. "If through his intervention he can help restore Ukraine's sovereignty and get Russian troops out of that country, then I wouldn't criticize that," he said. Secretary of State cleverly acknowledged that whether China can make a meaningful intervention remains to be seen. 10. Russia is trying to destroy values because it is afraid of Ukraine's path to the European Union. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said on Tuesday that Russia is seeking to destroy liberal values in Ukraine because it fears the country's path to joining the European Union. "We Europeans value our freedoms, our democracy, our right to freedom of thought and expression," von der Leyen said with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during a visit to Kyiv to mark Europe Day. "Ukraine is fighting for the European ideals that we celebrate today. In Russia, Putin and his regime destroyed these values," she said. "They fear the success you represent and the example you show, and they fear your path to the European Union," she said. Von der Leyen added that Russia had failed heavily and that Ukraine was successfully fighting back. 11. Zelensky says Europe's grain restrictions are totally unacceptable. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Tuesday criticized protective measures from neighboring countries to limit Ukraine's grain imports, saying they were completely unacceptable. Last week, the European Union approved a temporary measure banning wheat, corn, rapeseed and sunflower seeds from Ukraine from being exported to Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania and Slovakia. after these countries raised concerns about local farmers being disadvantaged by Ukraine's cheap grain prices. Unfortunately, we ran into problems where we should continue to see strong signs of solidarity, commensurate with the threats that exist today, tough protectionist measures. And even brutal, wartime from our neighbors, Zelensky said at a joint press conference with European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. He added, "Any restrictions on our exports now are completely unacceptable as they do not strengthen the strength of all of us in Europe, rather they strengthen us." Capabilities of the aggressor. Addressing Zelensky's concerns, von der Leyen described the grain topic as a challenging situation and vowed to establish a common, coordination platform for grain exports to operate as normal return. The immediate priority right now is to have the grain shipped as smoothly and at the lowest possible cost outside of Ukraine to the European Union, she said. 12. Russian tycoon criticizes terrible war in Ukraine. Russian oligarch Andrei Kovalev has criticized Moscow's invasion of Ukraine and its consequences for Russia. In a video shared by Kovalev on his Telegram channel on Monday, the businessman said he was initially certain that the Russian army would break through Ukraine's defenses and quickly capture Kiev within 2 or 3 weeks. He expressed surprise that this did not happen. Kovalev pointed to the heavy Russian losses since the invasion of Ukraine, including the retreat of Russian troops from the positions they had taken in the early part of the war, the sinking of the battleship Moskva. Russia last April, the explosion on the bridge connecting Crimea with the Russian mainland, and the recent alleged drone attack on the Kremlin. "This is not a special military operation, this is a terrible war," Kovalev said during a live broadcast for the All-Russian Entrepreneurs movement. "The whole world is against us. 122 countries voted to recognize us as aggressors," he added, referring to a resolution passed by the United Nations General Assembly last month. The resolution calling the war against Ukraine an aggression by the Russian Federation received 122 votes, including from China and India, 2 countries that have avoided condemning Moscow's all-out invasion. Andrei Kovalev is a Russian real estate businessman, public figure and president of the All-Russian Entrepreneurs movement. According to his biography on the movement's website, he previously held government posts and was a member of the Moscow City Duma. In 2012, Kovalev was included in the list of Russian real estate kings by Forbes Russia with an income of $55 million. There is little space for dissenting voices in Russia. Putin's tight control over the Russian information space prevents many citizens from accessing accurate reports on the Ukraine invasion. Those who try to speak out will face long prison sentences, or worse. But there are signs that some Russians are growing increasingly dismayed at how the faltering invasion has played out. Kovalev's words echo those of famous Russian pop star Alla Pugacheva, who in September called for an end to Russian soldiers dead for vain goals that have made our country the oppressors of our country considered inferior. Kovalev's criticism came the day before the Victory Day parade in Moscow, an event held annually on May 9 to commemorate the surrender of Nazi Germany in 1945, and was celebrated used in recent years to flaunt Russia's military might.